Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
There is a forgotten German silent film from the 1920s that is, I promise you, the undisputed, properly genius blueprint for every cinematic monster that came after it. I'm talking Frankenstein, The Mummy, even the foundational emotional beats of creature features. This film is the source code.
Wait, hold on a second. Are you joking? Der Golem wir in die Welt kam. You're starting this analysis with bloody hyperbole.
It's not hyperbole, it's a fact.
It's historically significant, absolutely. The images are phenomenal, I'll grant you that. But calling it the properly genius blueprint is madness. Our sources, the genre analysis texts we have here, Foundations of Fear and Shadows of Creation, even point out its somewhat incoherent narrative. It's a bit overhyped, frankly, and structurally it's a total shambles.
You cannot start the conversation by dismissing the fundamental point. We have sources, cinema, the magic vehicle, literally calling it a considerable achievement and recognizing its monumental influence on universal horror. My mission right now is clear: to prove that this 1920 film, directed by Paul Wegener and Carl Bose, is the absolute masterpiece that established the rules of horror cinema, despite its, yes, admitted narrative quirks.
And my mission is to highlight the dodgy bits. The ill-conceived romance, the fact that, aesthetic genius can often hide a complete mess of a script. We are here to help you understand this cinematic debate. Is this film a mandatory masterpiece, or is it just a visually stunning but structurally flawed relic? One that leans heavily on spectacle over substance. I promise to highlight the narrative shambles, as our source material suggests, because great blueprints should have solid foundations. This one's a bit wobbly.
Fine, but I'm telling you, the evidence is overwhelming for its absolute importance. The way it handled visual imagery, the themes of creation and control, it's all there. Let's start with the why.
Agreed. Let's delve into that. The pre-film context. The German obsessions. We need to understand why, in the early 1920s, a film like this was even possible. Why German cinema was, primed to seek out tales of the occult and artificial life.
Well, the 1920s context, particularly in Germany, was seismic. They had just come out of the First World War. The old social and political structures were shattered, and you had this really intense atmosphere of the Weimar Republic.
Right.
So silent cinema wasn't just silent in meaning, it was actively searching for a soul. Filmmakers were trying to process the psychological fallout of mass destruction, and they were going far beyond entertainment.
That's spot on. And the mood of the time, this intellectual movement known as Expressionism, it permeated everything. Art, architecture, and particularly film. Expressionism, for those listening who might not be familiar, was defined by the rejection of objective reality. It was all about subjective emotional experience. So it used distortion, angularity, harsh contrasts, all to express this inner turmoil. Cinema became the magic vehicle for exploring life, death, morality. All the big questions, as our material states.
And this is where Paul Wegener enters the stage. He wasn't some novice filmmaker who was suddenly inspired. He had 20 years in the theater before he transitioned to cinema. He was in The Student of Prague way back in 1913.
A key film.
A very key film. That early work, dealing with the student selling his reflection, it already showed his obsessive interest in astrology and the supernatural, and that theme of metamorphosis that was so characteristic of German cinema interests. He was steeped in this desire to see the soul reflected visually.
Often through a fragmented or a corrupted body, right?
Precisely.
He was focused on the uncanny, the unheimlich. But look, while I agree the period was crucial, the search for meaning was widespread. I mean, you could point to The Phantom Carriage from 1921. Now that illustrates this content search for meaning, guilt, fate.
A great film, yes, but
I'd say it's a far more profound, spiritually searching film about death and redemption.
Wait. You can't be serious comparing them. That's a massive generalization.
Why? It shows other filmmakers were wrestling with these ideas.
Because it's a different kind of intensity. That film deals with literal death and morality. The Golem deals with creation, persecution, and the creator's hubris. They both show the period was crucial, yes, but the Golem is the one that gave us the cinematic creature form.
Just because they were searching doesn't mean the Golem found anything revolutionary.
Except that is for the blueprint of the cinematic monster, which I keep telling you is the most important part.
Well, the specific challenge here is that Wegener started by transferring stories based on dark German folk legends to the screen. Things rooted in Teutonic mythology. The fact that he then pivoted to the not dissimilar Jewish tale of the Golem shows he was adapting existing folklore, not inventing a new monster structure from whole cloth. He saw a thematic link. The idea of an inanimate object brought to life by powerful, perhaps forbidden knowledge.
But the deliberate shift is what makes it genius. He wasn't just recycling his own output. He recognized that the Golem narrative, specifically the one set in the Prague ghetto, offered this uniquely potent blend of mysticism, political threat, and the man-playing God theme.
Okay.
It took the German obsession with the supernatural and gave it a potent, real-world context of persecution. It's a conscious effort to explore ancient narratives, which elevates it way beyond mere folk horror.
Okay, I'll concede that. The political setup of the Golem legend offers a genuinely high-stakes moral foundation, if they had stuck to it.
And they did.
But they didn't, which is my main complaint. They muddled the pure theological horror with petty human drama, as we'll see.
Fine. Let's move on to that. Der Golem, how he came into the world. The execution is what matters. And this execution, Der Golem wie in die Welt kam from 1920, is an assemblage of legendary talent. It was shot by the legendary Karl Freund and featuring art directors Hans Pulsig and Kurt Richter. That talent is what elevates it from a simple folklore adaptation to a cinematic foundation.
Right, so let's set the scene. Literally, It's 16th century Prague. We are in the ghetto, and it's an intentionally stylized and oppressive environment.
The premise is brutal. We open under a state of high alarm. The Emperor Luhoi orders the clearance of Jews from the ghetto. They're being persecuted. They're under threat. Their entire community is about to be expelled or destroyed.
It's a desperate situation.
It's desperate, and it requires divine or at least magical intervention. This is a high-stakes historical fantasy framework. The very real terror of anti-Jewish decrees used as the perfect stage for the Golem's entrance.
And this is where Rabbi Lowe comes in. He's the central figure, the wisest member, the moral and intellectual core of the community, and he's endowed with special powers. He's a master of Kabbalistic mysticism.
And his solution is mystical and biblical. He uses astrology to summon biblical characters to his aid. We see a projection of Astaroth onto the wall.
And then he gives life to the clay figure of the Golem. The method of creation is what becomes the blueprint.
Precisely. Let's talk about that mechanism. It's not electricity and spare parts. It's ritual, it's faith, it's language. The Golem is animated by a talisman, a five-pointed star, and the secret word emite,
Which is Hebrew for truth.
placed upon the Golem's heart.
What's fascinating here is the specific weight of that word, emite. Truth. The Golem is literally animated by the concept of truth, which is often interpreted as the sacred name of God. This talisman, this specific physical and linguistic key to creation, is the original source code for every cinematic monster that needs a vulnerability, a power source, or a method of control.
That's it exactly.
And if you remove the first letter, Aleph, you're left with mate, which means death. The mechanism of activation is the mechanism of deactivation. It's a genius structural setup.
The Golem's initial purpose is pure and noble. It is to save the persecuted people. It's the ultimate protector, the physical manifestation of divine intervention.
And it works, initially, with high political drama. Rabbi Lowe's magic compels the Emperor Luhoi to promise to revoke the anti-Jewish decree. The turning point is set during the Feast of Roses, which is a scene requiring, well, grand spectacle.
The Emperor is witness to the Golem's strength and Lowe's magic, especially after people mock the magical images displayed for the court. This mocking somehow angers a secondary character as Zeisver, who is introduced as an incarnation of the wandering Jew.
Right, hold on. This is where the narrative starts to show, it seems. The sources call this out as being overly dense.
It's complex, not dense.
For the benefit of the listener, Ahasver is a deeply fraught figure from medieval Christian legend. A Jew condemned to wander the earth until the second coming for insulting Jesus. He's a figure of eternal punishment and guilt. Why on earth is this specific figure from a completely separate, heavy European tradition suddenly appearing in the rabbi's magical ceremony in Prague and causing a ceiling to collapse?
It adds to the profound atmosphere. It shows that ancient, powerful forces, both Jewish and Gentile, are at play, and the moment is structurally necessary. The Emperor sees the Golem hold up the collapsing ceiling of the palace.
A collapsing ceiling.
It's an act of undeniable, immediate physical power preventing the destruction of the court. This setup is a powerful, politically charged fantasy, a proper historical framework.
Hold on a second. A collapsing ceiling? That sounds like melodramatic rubbish, mate.
It's spectacle.
It's what I mean by a structural shambles. You have Rabbi Lowe, a master of Kabbalah, summoning the power of Emite to fight political persecution. And then the critical moment of proof is triggered by the sudden out-of-nowhere anger of a Christian mythological figure of eternal punishment.
It creates the necessary drama.
It's trying to mash spectacle, serious morality, Jewish folklore, and medieval Christian legend together, and it's doing it clumsily. It feels like melodrama overriding any kind of theological precision.
I agree, Ahasuerus' appearance is a massive narrative leap, but the political weight is what matters. This is a story about an oppressed community finding divine intervention, and the visual execution of that intervention is what changed cinema, because it gave the audience an image of a hulking, silent, benevolent protector.
The visual execution, yes.
Absolutely. The visual style, the aesthetics, the use of light and structure, it's undeniable. The sources explicitly link the film to Max Reinhardt's theater and expressionism, both through Wegener and through the extraordinary art director Hans Poelzig and his collaborator Kurt Richter.
And Poelzig, who was a hugely famous German architect in his own right, brought a distinct, highly theatrical, and intentionally anti-realistic style to the production. These expressionist links are particularly obvious, not just in the way the crowd scenes are staged, but in the environment itself.
Detail the look for us, please. I want to hear it in all its celebrated, brilliant glory.
Well, you get those famous, curiously lighted sets of winding passages, steep streets, and crooked houses with pointed roofs. Now, here's where the technical brilliance comes in, courtesy of the great cinematographer Karl Freund.
Who went on to do Metropolis and Dracula, a legend.
Exactly. Freund understood expressionist lighting. He didn't just illuminate the scene, he used extreme directional lighting, what we would call chiaroscuro, creating deep, inky shadows and sharp contrasts.
That's the secret sauce. The lighting wasn't for realism. Freund's use of light and shadow created a visual sense of menace, isolating the characters in pools of light and submerging the rest of the world into an oppressive darkness. This technique, combined with Poelzig's sets, created an atmosphere of unease and fantasy, not strict realism.
And Poelzig's design was the physical manifestation of that unease. The houses weren't just quirky, they were distorted and angular, mirroring the subjective, stressed mental state of the ghetto's inhabitants. This was expressionist architectural features at their height, physically severing the film's links with reality, transferring it into a world of fairy tale, or perhaps nightmare.
Exactly. The visual imagery, the sets, they are mental, brilliant visual language. Poelzig's design is spot on for creating atmosphere, using light and shadow to evoke strong emotions without relying on dialogue or intertitles. They even managed to harmonize some of the open-air scenes shot in the old quarter of Prague with this stylized studio look. That shows masterful control.
Are you joking? Crooked houses and winding passages?
It's genius.
Look, I'll admit it's atmospheric, but it sounds pretentious. It's aestheticizing poverty.
No, it's not.
It makes the entire ghetto look like a bizarre, jagged funhouse. Deliberately unsettling the viewer, yes, but often screaming, "Look at my clever set design," over "Feel the plight of the oppressed." It's filmmaking as architectural theater, prioritizing form over the emotional core of the story.
But the atmosphere is the emotional core. This established a foundational rule for horror, that atmosphere and visuals, when stylized to this degree, are essential to suspend disbelief. This film showed you could use sets to project the internal psychological state of the community onto the world around them.
I agree that the use of distortion and shadow is foundational, but the sources also admit that some scenes, like the visit to the Imperial Palace, were done in the style of grand spectacle.
Yeah.
Another specialty of German cinema in the 1920s wasn't purely expressionist in the intense, claustrophobic style of Caligari.
So what?
He was trying to be deep, thematic exploration, expressionist art, and a huge, over-the-top historical epic with collapsing ceilings. It's a bit of a mess.
Wait. The grand spectacle point doesn't invalidate the expressionism. It just shows the ambition. They used expressionist techniques, the stylized crowd scenes, the angular architecture, to make the spectacle emotionally resonant. And look at the innovation. They used projection of past events onto a wall. That's a sophisticated visual tool for exposition. The sets, the photography, the special effects, they all combine to transfer it into that fairy tale world.
They certainly succeeded in severing its link with reality. But that link with reality is what often makes narrative cohesion stick. And that's why this film is often criticized. We see where that incoherence takes over, where the brilliance of the aesthetics has to work overtime to cover the script's flaws.
The narrative shambles versus the necessary chaos. I agree that the shift in motivation is jarring, but it works thematically. Let's delve into the flaw you love to pick apart.
Okay, the setup for the conflict is excellent, I'll give you that. The fatal mistake is born from hubris. Rabbi Lo, having saved his people, sees an unfavorable pattern in the stars, astrology, that recurring German obsession, and decides the golem must be destroyed before it harms anyone.
Right.
He immobilizes the golem by removing the talisman, preparing to smash the clay shell. The creator recognizes his error. High tragedy.
The moment of reflection, the science gone wrong trope is born right here.
But then the plot descends into pure farce. That high drama is immediately undercut by the naive subplot. Phimulus, the rabbi's servant, a character who should not carry the weight of world destruction, is unaware the golem has been deactivated, and he reactivates him for purely selfish, petty reasons.
Which are what, exactly? Let's detail the specifics of this disastrously naive subplot, as the sources call it, so the listener understands the context of the criticism.
It's a love triangle, a really silly one. Famulus wants to pursue his own private affairs. He is obsessed with Miriam, the rabbi's daughter, who is secretly seeing Florian, the emperor's messenger. Famulus reactivates the golem, intending to use its massive power to terrorize Florian and stop the secret romance, which he feels brings shame upon the rabbi. That's the motivation for the destruction of the ghetto. A jealous servant trying to break up a clandestine affair.
Okay, I agree that the sources call this subplot disastrously naive, and the narrative somewhat incoherent. On the face of it, the core drive for the monster going wild is a dodgy, ill-conceived romance.
Rubbish, mate. Absolute rubbish. Hear me out. How can this be a foundational classic if the entire cataclysm, the monster becoming a mindless destroyer, is driven by petty jealousy?
But the scale of the destruction is what matters.
The golem becomes out of control and overcome with destructive passion, mutinying against its creator and sowing chaos and burning the ghetto. And the spark was a servant being jealous. It reduces the stakes to zero.
But the effect is what matters, and the effect is thematically profound. This is where the film finds its true genius. The loss of control and the creator's shame, that's the science gone wrong trope distilled down to its essence.
No.
It doesn't matter why the golem is reactivated. It matters that once reactivated improperly by human fallibility, it becomes a destructive force.
It absolutely matters why. If the motivation is weak, the resulting chaos is just spectacle, not tragedy.
It's not weak, it's human.
If Lo had reactivated him to fight the Emperor and the golem turned on him, that's tragedy. A jealous servant means the beautiful aesthetics are being used to give gravitas to a completely flimsy plot. It's aesthetically beautiful shambles trying to hide lazy writing.
No, the genius lies in the ease of corruption. Lo created this pure protector using the power of truth, but because he made it physical, because he made it susceptible to control by removing the talisman. His creation is immediately corrupted by the lowest human passions, jealousy and spite.
That's a very charitable reading.
The creation is easily misused once the creator is momentarily distracted. That's a far more chilling lesson than the monster simply being inherently evil.
So, the chaos justifies the means. You are retrofitting a sophisticated philosophical reason onto what the sources explicitly label a naive and incoherent narrative decision.
I am using the textual evidence of the effect to counter your focus on the inciting device. The golem becomes a mindless destroyer and smashes the gate between the Jewish quarter and the city, threatening the palace. It's a necessary element of chaos for the story to land and to demonstrate the terror of creation unleashed.
So we have a huge rampaging monster because of a lover's tiff.
Lo manages to extinguish the fire and save his abducted daughter using his spells, but the monster has already served its purpose, showing the world what unchecked power looks like.
And demonstrating that even the most benevolent, divinely inspired creation can be turned into an engine of destruction by the simplest, pettiest human malice.
Okay. I can see the thematic implication of Famulus's actions is profound, the vulnerability of great power to small minds.
Exactly.
But the execution is still structurally weak. Well, let's move past the weak beams and look at the whole structure. This is the architectural blueprint for modern horror. You can't argue with the legacy this established.
All right, let's talk legacy. But I want to be clear that a wonky foundation doesn't make the entire structure sound. It just means the subsequent architects had to use better reinforcing steel.
The golem is the undisputed monster archetype. State explicitly. The idea of a figure brought to life inspired the handling of Dr. Frankenstein's creation, the classic movie monster. Full stop.
Wow.
The golem is the direct ancestor of Universal's Frankenstein, a foundational link in the monster cinematic universe. The time difference is minimal, 1920 to 1931, and the influence is clear.
I acknowledge the inspiration that paved the way, but let's look closer at the specific nature of this blueprint. The golem is created through mysticism, ancient spells, and the sacred word emet. Frankenstein's creation is pure 19th century scientific hubris, utilizing electricity, discarded corpses, and radical experimentation. They're very different.
That distinction is the blueprint. The Golem established the structure of the narrative, the creator, the forbidden act, the initially benevolent or neutral creature, the loss of control, and the eventual tragic demise.
Okay, the structure.
Frankenstein simply updated the power source. Instead of Kabbalistic power, it was industrial power. The core theme man usurping God's role and the creation suffering as a result was perfectly laid out by Wegener. The Frankenstein monster is inherently sympathetic, just like the Golem, which is why the ending is so resonant.
Exactly. Let's look at the Golem's arrest, the dramatic beat that truly solidified the archetype and was immediately borrowed by Hollywood.
This is the genius moment, the one that defines the creature's soul or lack thereof. The Golem, the mindless destroyer, is stopped not by military force, not by Rabbi Lowe's immense magic,
But by fate and innocence.
it's truly moving.
The scene where the monster, now mutinous and directionless, meets the children at play outside the ghetto walls. He is separated from the adult world of politics, malice, and magic.
A little girl, played by Loni Nest, approaches him. She offers him an apple, the symbol of innocence and temptation.
Right.
The Golem, being a simple construct attracted by simple shapes and perhaps purity, is drawn to her. Taken into the Golem's arms, she sees the 5-pointed talisman on his chest.
And, attracted by the glittering star, she simply removes the talisman from his chest, thus arresting his wild powers. He collapses, inert clay once more, leaving the girl confused.
It's just a perfect cinematic moment.
It's a beautifully simple, resonant moment, I'll grant you that. It underscores the Golem's simple, almost childlike attraction to innocence, contrasting with his destructive phase. He wasn't inherently evil, just misused and uncontrollable. It's a specific dramatic beat, innocence versus the monster, that we see replicated everywhere, including the famous, poignant scene with the child and the monster in the 1931 Frankenstein film. It's a direct link, thematically.
Exactly. That single moment is one of the 4 essential thematic staples laid down by the Golem that are still used today. First, the creation of the creature feature archetype itself, the hulking, silent, tragic figure.
Agreed.
Second, utilizing atmospheric visuals, the lighting, and those crooked sets to suspend disbelief and create psychological dread.
Okay.
Third, the loss of control, science gone wrong trope, specifically showing how easy it is for human pettiness to corrupt a great creation.
And fourth, that specific dramatic beat of innocence versus the monster, where the creature's simple nature is revealed by a child, often leading to its demise or salvation. I cannot deny the structural influence of these 4 points. The Golem is significant because it was the first widely influential film to put those patterns into a single structure.
Thank you.
However wobbly that structure might have been narratively.
Oh, come on. The sources nail the summary perfectly. The Golem is the architectural blueprint for the haunted house of modern horror. We are still living in the structure Polzig and Wegener designed.
And that's the final analogy where I must challenge you. That's a neat analogy, but it's just academic marketing, isn't it?
It's an accurate description.
If the Golem is the blueprint, then the structural beams, the narrative, are completely wonky, the walls are crooked, and the internal design is a bit of a bloody mess due to that naive romance subplot.
The walls are meant to be crooked. That's the point.
Sure, modern filmmakers added new layers of paint sound and electricity, CGI, and furniture gore, but they had to reinforce the structural beams themselves to make the story coherent.
They followed the specifications, though. The lighting techniques, the monster archetypes, and the themes of man playing God. They followed the exact specifications drawn up in the 1920s. This film showed how to create atmosphere over exposition.
They followed the idea, yes, but they refined the execution. It remains a visually magnificent film that, frankly, tells a structurally flawed story. But its images were so powerful and so immediate, they influenced better stories that followed. That's the difference between a historically vital document and a mandatory masterpiece.
I think we'll have to fundamentally disagree on whether that story is structurally flawed or just possessed of a necessary chaotic naivete that makes the creature's motivation all the more tragically human.
Indeed. It is a film that demands your attention visually, but rewards critical scrutiny narratively. So, what does this all mean for you? Whether you choose to view The Golem as a mandatory masterpiece of thematic and visual innovation,
Which you should.
or a structurally flawed relic that only happened to influence films like Frankenstein and The Mummy, the opposition in viewpoints shouldn't diminish its historical value.
But knowing about this origin story is crucial for understanding modern horror and cinematic language. When you see a monster stop by a child, when you see crooked, stylized streets or a scientist regretting his creation, you are spotting those early blueprints drawn by Wegener and designed by Polzig and Freund. It's the foundational DNA of the creature feature. It shows us how powerful the simple image of artificial life can be.
And it helps you understand why atmosphere over exposition became the rule. Silent film mastered the art of evoking strong emotions without dialogue, relying entirely on visual language. And that emotional resonance, that sense of uncanny dread provided by those set designs, is what modern horror needs to succeed. It's a moment when cinema learned how to make the set itself a character.
So let's leave you with this final unresolved thought to explore, linking this 1920 visual masterpiece to modern cinema. Given that the power of the Golem was arrested by innocence, a child removing the talisman, what major modern horror franchise has tried and failed to use innocence or a child character as the weapon against its primary antagonist, resulting in a disastrous narrative failure?
That's a good one.
Think about that tension between purity and destruction, and whether it's ever landed as perfectly as it did in 1920 with a little girl and a clay statue.